is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, Episode 6. Josh is irrelevant. In this episode, we see how Rebecca recovers from her suicide attempt and the way that her friends band around her and how she finally comes to the conclusion that all of us have known was the truth all along. What's going on with her has nothing to do with Josh. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Erica for commissioning this episode. So this was really interesting. I was very excited at the direction that this episode took because I really, like I said at the end of the last one, I didn't know what to expect. We don't really see exactly how everything is handled with Rebecca ODing on a plane specifically. So I didn't get the answers to a lot of my questions, which is really fine. Like it would have been boring, but I am still curious like how that would have worked. But we start off with Rebecca in the hospital and all of her friends are already there. When I saw Paula, I was kind of like, oh, of course Paula's here. That makes total sense. But then we cut to Heather and Valencia are here. Eventually Hector shows up as well, which Valencia is really weird about. Honestly, that's one of those things where part of me agreed with Valencia in that only because of the fact that Hector is one of Josh's friends that I was kind of like, I don't know about this. But obviously Valencia has her own whole thing going on. This episode, I really enjoy how much this show lets characters really explore some of the like worst impulses that they have. And it's Valencia is the kind of person who handles this specific sort of event in such a totally different way than I would. Yet I understand where she's coming from, which is not always the case. Sometimes people handle things differently and I just can't wrap my head around it. I'm just like, I don't get you. Why would you ever? With Valencia, it's like, I absolutely would never, but I sort of see why this is comforting to you. And also, I was just so happy to see how everybody was banding around Rebecca because I didn't really know. I kind of wondered if we were going to like see them getting notified about what had happened to her or have them like showing up after the fact, like at her house once she had finally gotten home, and to see that they were all at the hospital already just really made me happy. And also the fact that, Rebecca is constantly like apologizing for making a big deal and for everybody being here and how this is so embarrassing. That really rang true to me. Like, it's the sort of thing that just, especially because we often treat attempted suicide as sort of a joke. Like, we'll sort of act as if like, you know, oh, well, she called somebody and told them that she had taken all the pills, so she was never really in danger of dying. So it was just a cry for attention. It doesn't even count. And it's one of those things where it's like, I will admit up front, I've been totally guilty of this sort of attitude myself, like when I was a teenager and stuff. Because there is definitely like sort of a misogynistic edge to that line of thinking, where we don't like women who want attention. It's something that women are supposed to be small, and they should get attention when we feel like they deserve it, but they should not demand attention. And by doing something like this, it would be not only a demand for attention, but it would be seen as pathetic in its way. Especially because most people from the outside would simply see this as like circling around a boy, even though we know it's definitely about more than that. And the fact that we are taught, oh, well, it's just a cry for attention, and we write that off as if it doesn't mean anything because that's all it was, is so laughably missing the point. Yeah, somebody wanted attention for the fact that they are in a huge amount of pain and feel completely alone and abandoned by their friends and family and are going through some shit that they don't feel they can talk honestly about with anybody. Oh, I'm so sorry that somebody wanted attention because of this. What a crime. You know, it's just... we have a long way to go as a culture before we really begin to understand the depths to which misogyny is embedded in our reactions to things. Because, let's be clear, a dude who does this sort of thing does not get the same reaction that a woman does when she does this kind of thing. And when I say does, like, I'm not talking about in this episode specifically. I'm talking about when you are younger and experiencing this sort of thing for the first time, the attitudes that are very pervasive. And a dude is just like, you know, it's taken more seriously. When a woman does it, it's seen as this like hysterical overreaction, and she's just trying to get people to feel sorry for her. And it's really rough. So I wasn't entirely sure how everybody was going to be. I was a little afraid that maybe they wouldn't be as supportive, or there might be like talk like that a little bit, especially from Josh or maybe one of Josh's friends. Like, I don't want his friends to be trash and talk like that, but it wouldn't be out of line for the show to depict some people who feel that way. It wouldn't be... I think it would be responsible for them to show that some people do still have that attitude and address it. At the same time, like I said, I don't want any of the characters that I've grown to know and love to be the ones to act that way. And so the only person that I could really see getting away with saying anything like that would have to be like somebody that isn't a real main character. So anyway, Paula comes out of the room and she is telling Heather and Valencia that, you know, Rebecca is asleep, that she has everything managed right now. And she tells Valencia, I have a job for you. There are a lot of people out there who really are worried. They've heard what happened. And they are very, very sweet and well-meaning, but they are blowing her phone up, and she can't get any rest and can't reply to everybody. Can y'all just let her people know that she's okay? And Valencia's response to this, and I'm just going to pretty much talk about Valencia's deal in one shot. Valencia's response to this is to do a Facebook video. I think it's a Facebook Live, if I'm not mistaken. It might be Instagram. She seems more like an Instagram person, but Facebook for me would be like the more effective way to get this out there. But, you know, I don't know. But she does this video, and Heather comes in while she's doing it and sort of is like, I thought you would just like shoot everybody an email. You're going to do a video? And it's a very low-key interaction. Like, Heather is, I think, having an understandable sort of like reaction to it. I would also kind of be like, because I wasn't expecting her to do a video at all, you know? So when Heather was sort of like, oh, I had felt the same way. So I sort of appreciated her mentioning, that's not what I thought you were going to do. But Valencia says they thought it would be better to like hear somebody's voice, and that she like said something about doing it this way to Rebecca, and Rebecca thought it was a really good idea. And when she says all that, I'm kind of like, okay, you know what? And Heather lets it go and is very like, you know what? If Rebecca says that's 100% like her deal, I respect whatever she decides that she's comfortable with. However, things begin to spiral a little bit out of control. And when I say that I wouldn't react this way personally, I've talked about this on the show, how I have this weird sort of dichotomy where I will share a lot about my personal like feelings and experiences on the podcast, but I do that on the podcast because there's a safe amount of distance. It's not really, it feels like the people who listen to the podcast are a lot of times friends, but you know, there are a lot of listeners who aren't close friends with me, and I don't want a lot of like closer friends or family listening to the show. If they do, I mean, I guess, but there's like a degree of remove between myself and the people who hear what I'm talking about. And because of that, it feels less personal to me, and I feel less vulnerable because of that. When it comes to personal stuff, actual things that are going on in the moment with also people that are involved in my life personally, I don't often like to share every detail or be open about how I'm feeling until I have had time to process it and package my feelings neatly in a way that is easily consumable for other people. And basically, I look at experiences that I have as not a finished product that I want to put out in the world. I like to wait until whatever issue I'm dealing with has a resolution a lot of the time before I tell people what's going on with me. It's a weird way to live, and that's just how I be. The only people who know about the messiness in the middle are really like Owen, my mom occasionally, but even with her, I don't tell her everything because she has these like reactions that I find to be more annoying than helpful. And Rashawn, a lot of the time. And other than that, I sort of like process things and deal with things privately. And so, if I were close friends with somebody who had just gone through this and I was in the hospital, I do not think I would even post about it. I don't think I would say anything about it to anybody at all. It would just be too painful, and it would be too dangerous an area to stray near publicly, because I would still be so much of a mess that I wouldn't want other people commenting and leaving like their thoughts and feelings on a thing while I'm in the middle of experiencing it in real time, if that makes sense. I want to go through it, feel how I feel about it after the fact, and then tell everybody, hey, I just went through this thing, and I am out the other side. I've got my impressions of what I learned, what that meant, and I am sharing with you all now because I feel like this is a complete life experience in a little story that I can share easily. So for me, doing things the way that Valencia does here is you're making yourself vulnerable, but she does it in a way that's the opposite of that. And I think that's the key, is that Valencia manages to share something that's extremely personal while making it feel like it is not at all personal and much more just about a hypothetical person. Rebecca doesn't feel like a real human being to the movement that she's talking about. And I understand wanting to do it that way too. It's another sort of method for distancing that is in a way sort of like my talking about it like on the podcast with people that I don't know super well. Getting a lot of people involved who aren't emotionally invested in the way that you are can make it feel less immediate and less scary to you. And we find out, like, in the end, because stuff starts to really pop off. Eventually, she's talking about this, like, lip gloss that Rebecca got sent. And Heather steps in and basically is like, girl, what the fuck? You're getting swag because of Rebecca's suicide attempt? Are you seriously doing this? And Valencia, like, I really was at the time kind of like, do you give a shit about Rebecca? Like, what are you doing, girl? And then later on, when there's that scare and she's on the toilet with her headphones on, and she comes out and Valencia just collapses. Valencia tells Rebecca, I'm sharing everything with everybody, trying to, like, get this culture of, like, hope and make it seem like you're doing so much better, because I am scared that you're not doing better, and I am terrified that this is going to happen again, and I'm going to lose you. And once she said it like that, I was like, okay, that 100% makes sense to me. Like, it's, like I said, it's not how I would do it, but it's not alien. The concept is similar to how I cope. It's just done in a different way. And that fear, I was so pleased that this episode really dealt with how Rebecca's friends are coping with this, because it's something that I think we don't want to talk about a lot of the time, because we don't want the person who attempted suicide to feel guilt, right? We want them to get better. And in order to get better, we want them to be shielded from the effect that they've had on other people, because we know that part of their despair was this feeling like they are doing nothing but harming everyone in their lives. So when you are involved with a person on a personal level that has just attempted suicide, you don't want to make it about you. You know, you are, at least those of us who have some self-awareness, are very much focused on the other person and ensuring that they are surrounded by support rather than blame. All of that is absolutely true. That said, there is no avoiding the fact that somebody you're close to tries to kill themselves, and that shit's going to have an effect on you. It's going to really feel like something has shifted in your life, and now there is something to really be afraid of in a way that maybe you didn't know before it was a possibility. Like, maybe you didn't know somebody was even contemplating this, or you were aware they were depressed, but you weren't aware that they were so so close to the edge that this was something they were contemplating. And so you begin to get really paranoid. And I say this as somebody who has, like I have said before, I have friends who struggle with this kind of thing, and I am constantly afraid that I am going to wake up in the morning and find out one of them has gone. It is something that I worry about every single day, every single solitary day. And that's real too. And you don't want to put that on your friends, because you know they are under a lot of pressure already. They already feel shitty. They already are struggling. So you don't want that to be a burden they carry. But it's just the reality of being friends with people who are struggling. That is just part of it. You can't avoid that kind of worry. And the fact that this just happened, and Rebecca, as we see, sorry, I dropped my lotion cap. As we see later, Rebecca gets a diagnosis that she does not like or agree with. They are concerned that this is going to cause kind of a relapse for her, which is really understandable, because she had been feeling such hope and was flying really high. And to come crashing back down to earth the way that she did, that could easily be seen as something that could trigger an episode with her. So I just really like the fact that the show is willing to explore the concern that her friends are going to continue to feel. This is not something that just goes away. You don't go, oh my God, thank God she's okay. I know that she'll never try that again because look at how much she regrets it. And she's like, that's not how that works. You know, you try it once and you try to get help and you try to improve your life. And if that doesn't seem to be working out right away, I would understand why people would think, oh my God, what if this is it? What if they try again? And a lot of people who wind up killing themselves have tried it before. It's usually not the first time. So that fear is entirely justified, like 100%. And I thought it was well done that the show managed to keep the focus on Rebecca, make it about her recovery, but they don't leave out the fact that her friends are super worried about her and not really sure how to handle it. They don't know. You know, eventually she comes out of her bedroom and they're all just asleep on the floor outside of her bedroom because they are all so concerned something's going to happen, but they don't really know how to like say that to her. So they just hang around weirdly, you know, and if you don't know how to talk to somebody about what's going on with them, that's a really tough spot. So I was so glad that Valencia breaks down and is just basically, and it touched me a lot too, that Valencia specifically says, I have never had a friend like you before. Because we know that's true. You know, Valencia hasn't got a lot of practice having close friends. And so this would be even more terrifying for somebody like her who feels like she's finally found her person. I thought it was really touching, and I liked that she says, you have to promise me never to do this again. And Rebecca is very honest, and it's like, I really want to be able to make that promise to you, but I can't. She's like, I live with an illness, and this is a reality of some, like a symptom. And I appreciated that she doesn't make that promise, that she has to be as honest as she can, because I feel that the Rebecca we have seen before would have made that promise. I feel like the fact that she admits she can't is major character growth for her. This is just a big step forward in looking at the reality of where she is as a person rather than trying to live in where she wishes she was, this fantasy, you know? And that's not an easy thing to do. Having self-awareness is really scary. And that's, I think, part of the reason so few people really have it. When you become more aware of yourself and the world around you, you have to deal with a lot more uncertainty overall in the way you move through your life. And most of us don't cope super well with uncertainty. You know, most of us are we as human beings love things to be in black and white absolutes. We like to be told this is good, this is bad. We like to be told do this, don't do that ever. Even if we don't follow the rules, we like to know the rules are there because it makes us feel like there's an order to things. And once you really begin to explore the way things work and realize that there are no absolutes almost ever, and everybody's just kind of muddling through as best they can with no real clue, it starts to get genuinely terrifying to realize that you and everyone else in the world is just making it up. That's not something that feels safe, because it's not safe. Like, spoilers, that's just, you know. So I appreciate that Rebecca has reached a place that she isn't trying to cling to absolutes. She isn't trying to be like, of course I'll never do it again, because she simply wants to say whatever she needs to say to keep Valencia as a friend, to stop Valencia from being upset. She's not attempting to calm her down with lies. She's being honest, even though it's deeply uncomfortable and not particularly reassuring. But that is how it has to be if we're being honest with people a lot of the time. There's no guarantees. So I really, like I said, I really appreciated this. I thought it was compassionate for the show to address this in the way that they did. I think that they did it in a way that emphasizes how much everybody cares about Rebecca without making it seem like Rebecca has, like, you know, caused some sort of... I feel like in the wrong hands, this sort of storyline and this emphasis on her friend's reaction could make it look like Rebecca was a shit stirrer. You know, somebody who's just high maintenance and causes a lot of trouble. God knows Rebecca is high maintenance. I mean, that's certainly true in its own other way. But in this regard, it's just, you don't know how badly it can be done until you see it sometimes. And I've seen storylines that are in a similar vein to this that I didn't feel did well with the material, the subject matter at all. So anyway, okay, I'm going back. And I was very excited that, what is the doctor's name that she sees again? I always want to say Dr. Cornucopian. Megan says Acopian. Thank you, Megan. Dr. Acopian is here, which I was super happy about. I said at the end of the last episode that I was, like, hopeful that the doctor would be there, that she would be the one that Rebecca was seeing again. She's just a great actress. I just really enjoy her depiction of this character, and I would have hated to lose her. And we see her at the end of this episode as well, with the kind of come to Jesus moment that Rebecca has. So the doctor tells her, you were brave, you asked for help, and is just trying to be as encouraging as she can, and says, I'll let you get some rest, but don't worry, there are some great psychiatrists on staff here, and we'll work together to get you the right help. And we wind up meeting her new doctor a little bit later, and he is this, like, super cute... He looks very familiar. I'm sure he's from something that I've seen before. But he is very charming and has that sort of seriousness that you want from somebody in his, like, position with that responsibility. But there's, like, a sort of twinkle in his eye that you really get the sense that there's humor in there. And he is... We have the first moment where he tells Rebecca, I think you've been misdiagnosed. And she nearly hits the ceiling. And I loved this reaction because that is exactly my reaction when he says that. I was like, oh, word? What is that? And then she has the same, like, kind of freak out. I don't know if it's possible to really understand this feeling if you aren't somebody who has struggled with any kind of medical issue, whether it's mental health or not. When somebody tells you they think that they've got the right diagnosis and that you were misdiagnosed and that's why other things weren't working for you, it is like a sunrise. It's this hope. And that the song, My Diagnosis, is such a perfect result of this feeling that the shades are going up and light is flooding into a dark room and you feel all of this, like, potential. Oh my God, now that we know what the problem is, we can maybe deal with it. And I struggled with this a lot. I've talked about this on other shows. When I was, in 2008, it was right before I got married. I was really dealing with a lot of weird health issues. I had muscle seizures. I was fainting. I was gaining a lot of weight really quickly. I was, like, losing control of my bladder at times. There were just a lot of issues that all seemed to be neurological in nature. And yet I would go to doctor after doctor and none of them really knew what to tell me. And it got really scary because my symptoms were not going away. And some of the doctors just straight up behaved as if it was all in my head, which is certainly something that lots of doctors will say. They all tried to behave as if it was stress. I had one doctor who thought it might be Lyme disease. It might be lupus. It might be MS. Eventually, one of my doctors said, I am wondering if you may have celiac disease. You may want to cut gluten from your diet and see if that does anything. And I did, and the symptoms almost immediately went away. And I mean went away. The only thing that remained was a bit of a muscle twitch in my face, which I still have. And that has not been easy because that kind of behavioral change, like just stopping eating gluten is super, super hard, guys. I don't know if you know this. So I have been struggling and I'm back on track with being gluten-free now. But being given treatments for certain things, if you're taking pills, can feel so much simpler than finding out that there's like something like that you have to change. But discovering that there might be something that was within my control to do to improve my situation was massive. And also being taken seriously was massive. Like, even if a doctor isn't able to actually give you a diagnosis, even if it doesn't seem like they know what to tell you, the fact that they are listening and exploring options and asking you questions, that means a lot, because so many of us, I think, have experienced being blown off. You know, it's just that comes with the territory. Not all doctors are particularly great at their jobs. Not all of them have a lot of faith in people in general, women in particular. And that can be women doctors as well, who have that same sort of dismissive attitude. So Rebecca's reaction to him saying that she's been misdiagnosed just rang super, super true to me. You just want to know what the fuck is going on, because it can feel like I'm doing all the things that I've been told to do, and I'm not feeling better. I'm not seeing any results, and I just don't fucking know what more I can do. If nobody knows, you know, if nobody has additional advice or options for me, I'm out here just fucking, you know, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And yeah, he says that her treatment protocol is not centered on medication. There may be some, but it's not the main focus. You've been misdiagnosed over the years. It's one of the main reasons you've been struggling. I think with the right diagnosis and treatment, you can get a lot better. And he doesn't want to tell her what her diagnosis is until she comes in for her group therapy. Now, I got to tell you guys, I'm extremely interested to see what this group therapy is like, because I can't imagine anything worse. No, I gotta be straight up. I am not good at being vulnerable in general. The idea of being vulnerable in a room full of essential strangers, absolutely fucking not. Do you hear me? No. No, it's not happening. It just won't, I promise. I went to see the same therapist for 2 straight months before I ever cried in front of her. And once I finally cleaned my face up and kind of got control of myself again, she was like, thank you. She said thank you. And was like, I have been watching you dance around anything that makes you upset and then back away from it for 8 weeks. And it's been killing me. I just needed you to open up and be really honest. And this is part of the reason why, when that therapist moved on, because she was a PhD student, so I was getting to go to these sessions for a huge discount because it was part of a program at the university. She moved on to a new program, and I was supposed to get set up with a new therapist, and I didn't go. I just didn't show up because I had gone through so much to finally get to a place where I could be vulnerable and trust her, that the concept of starting all over again with somebody who did not know me at all just was too much. I absolutely couldn't face it. And it's sort of irritating to think back because they filmed a lot of my sessions, which I knew. They weren't in the camera, like in the room with the camera, but I knew that was happening for the program. And she took a lot of notes. So I know that the woman that I was about to be set up with, the new doctor, would have a lot of my background already, and I probably wouldn't have had to, quote, start over the way that I thought. But it felt to me like I did. And I just was not interested at all. So this idea of going into a room with a diagnosis that makes me really uncomfortable, which is what Rebecca's experience is once we find out what it is, and trying to have any sort of honesty about where I'm at, how I'm feeling, I'm sorry, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it. Megan says, same. It takes me half of my appointment to even get somewhere vulnerable with my therapist. Exactly. And isn't that so annoying, Megan? You finally get there and you get about 4 minutes and then they're like, okay, time's up. And you're like, oh, come on. Like, we need double length therapy sessions. We really do. So I'm very curious to see what this is going to be like. And I really don't have any good idea on how that goes. I've only ever seen group therapy in the context of like being in a asylum, mental health hospital in movies and television. I've never actually like seen it done in the context of this show where it feels much less intensive. She's not living on the premises. This isn't, it feels going to be a slightly more realistic depiction in some ways than what I've seen. And so I don't know what that even is like. But she's super stoked to get her new diagnosis. So she's supposed to meet with this doctor, Dr. Dam, as we're going to call him, and talk with him before her group therapy session. And he tells her not to look this up on the internet, and she promises that she won't. And he tells her that he thinks that she has borderline personality disorder. And this is not something that she's ever heard of. She doesn't seem to know anything about it. And the fact that he doesn't really want to reveal anything to her and wants her to simply go into the therapy session doesn't sit right with her. So she does what she does, which I think a lot of us probably would do if we're being honest with ourselves. I think I would probably look it up. She goes into the bathroom. She looks up borderline personality disorder, and she sees that there is just a lot of results about how it's an extremely stigmatized condition. Something like 30% of people who have it wind up killing themselves. It just all seems like this is really bad news. It's among the most challenging to treat. Treatment often takes a lifetime. Many psychiatrists refuse to treat patients with BPD. And its treatment is slow and difficult. 10% of all people with BPD eventually commit suicide. And she panics, completely panics, and rushes home again without going to her group therapy appointment. And she's talking with everybody about how, like, I don't have an illness. I have a personality disorder. It's not something I have. It's something I am. Honestly, going into this, I did not have a lot of understanding about personality disorder. Like, this is something that I've heard a lot in my life, and I have had like some vague, like probably pop culture influenced understanding of some of the symptoms. And so there have been people in my life that I've thought have this, and I've said so, but not really with any intelligence about it, not with any actual knowledge behind it. So, and the idea of being diagnosed with this personality, it's not, oh, here's a thing that's like separate from you, which is often how we are able to make ourselves feel slightly better about having depression or having anxiety. We have like this vision of ourselves as who we are, and then the illness, which is infecting us, right? We have an idea of like, this is how I would be if my body functioned properly and produced the hormones that it's supposed to and produced the like chemicals, serotonin, whatever that it's supposed to. I can't because of this fucking issue. So I am being affected by my body. My personality would be better if it weren't for the fact that my body is fucking me over. But when you say it as a personality disorder, that feels like that's you. You are fucked up. Sorry. Something fundamentally in the foundations of who you are as a person is messed up. That sucks. I guess we can try and like slowly shift things out of the way to get at that foundation and sort of try and relay those bricks. But it's going to be a while. It's a lot of work. And I don't know if we're ever really going to do it. And I don't know. Maybe that's just never going to happen for you. I 100% understand her reaction here. I really get it. So she says at this point that she's broken. And Paula is just like, oh my God, first of all, you're not broken. You're wonderful. And she says, you know what? This doctor barely even knows you. It's maybe a misdiagnosis. If you hate it, why don't you go and maybe talk to Dr. Akopian and see if you can get a second opinion from somebody who knows you better, who has, you know, had some experience dealing with you before. And she's like, okay, you know what? That's actually a great idea. I love this thing when she's talking about the diagnosis and she's using the word D. Instead of saying diagnosis, you don't have to just take his D. Who says his D is so great? Oh, you're right. He should get to know me better before he shoves his D down my throat. Yeah, and what we should go get is another D, and then we'll have 2 Ds. And, you know, one here, one there, and we'll just figure out which D you like better. Oh my God, guys, honestly, this is such a, like, lowbrow joke, but it was still very funny to me. I still enjoyed it. So they go to see Dr. Akopian, who just happens to be in the middle of a session with the owner of Home Run. Is that the name of it? Home Plate? Home Base. Home Base? Is it Home Base? I never remember. Oh, thank you, Megan. It is Home Base. Thank God. And he's talking about how he's just such a happy person. And it's hard because I know not everyone feels that way. And that makes me sad. And she says, I hear you. And that's wonderful. But maybe we could circle back to what you told me last week about your mother shooting your father in cold blood in front of you on your birthday. Shit got dark, guys. Oh, God. I feel bad laughing, but, like, honestly, that is so fucking funny to me. This dude, this smiley dude, having this horror in his past, and then he immediately jumps up, like when Rebecca busts in and the doctor is just like, what the fuck, seriously, Rebecca? And he's immediately like, no, I'm fine, I'm feeling great, actually, you continue on with them. And then we hear him outside saying, Mommy, why? And I just really want to know more about this, and I really want this whole thing to be like more ongoing, and I found this just so funny. Also, I want to mention, Rebecca's wearing this yellow dress, and I love it, and I want it this episode. Rebecca and I are built in a similar way. I'm obviously, like, way heavier than her, but we both have a sort of pear shape and big boobs, and she wears a lot of stuff that I'm just like, oh man, I could really make that work. And this dress is one of those things. I almost own a dress exactly like this, but not quite. And I'm like, no, I want that one. So she tells Dr. Akopian about the personality disorder and how she feels like it's a misdiagnosis. And I don't understand why they think that. I think he tricked you into telling me that this is what it is. And she says, did you talk to Dr. Shin? And did you go to your group therapy? And Rebecca admits, no, I didn't want to hear about it. I know it's wrong. I know in my heart it's wrong. So just give me a new thing. And Dr. Akopian nods in this way that's like, fuck, yeah, this is really lining up with everything that I thought. So she goes and gets a notebook and she says, here are the symptoms. And if you have 5 of the following 9 tendencies, you likely have BPD. So she begins to read and we get the series of them with a flashback showing us an instance of Rebecca experiencing this. So, first one is severe mood swings. And we see a moment where she's happy and joking around with Josh and then immediately gets really serious and obsessive and profound fear of abandonment, which God knows that is like a driving force for her as a character. Instability in relationships. I mean, yeah. And interestingly, when we get the flashback for this one, it's not a romantic relationship. It's her fighting with Paula, which I thought was really neat because I was, of course, expecting something about the fact that she like jumped from being obsessed with Josh to then Greg back to Josh. But no, it's a friendship thing. And I think it's important that we recognize that as also a relationship, and that because we put so much emphasis and importance on romantic relationships when we think of things that we fail to really see the way friendships fall into these categories as well. Unstable sense of identity. And we have her literally shouting after Josh, I don't know who I am if you're not in my life anymore. Paranoia or dissociative episodes. And we have her like screaming, Robert, no, in that moment where she doesn't even realize that she said it out loud because she's so not even in her body. Excessive and frequent anger. And we've seen that a million times. Feelings of emptiness. And impulsive behavior. We see her sleeping with Greg's dad. And lastly, recurring suicide threats or attempts. And it's amazing. She says, oh my God. And Paula starts laughing and says, I know, so not you, right? And Rebecca is the one that's like, Paula, sweetie, every single one of those was me. And again, I think that's so important. The fact that it's Rebecca who realizes, because you can't do anything to improve your situation if you don't see the problem. So if Rebecca isn't willing to look at the fact that this is likely what's going on with her, that's it. She's stuck until she feels that this is it and really believes it and sees the truth in the symptoms that she's having. There's no way of moving forward because this is all about her. So it's just crucial that she see. And the look on her face, when she says, I don't have 5, I have 9. It's just devastation. And I really like Dr. Akopian just sitting and watching her, and Rebecca looking at her and nodding, like making eye contact and nodding in a way that signals real acceptance, in a way that we haven't seen with her and Akopian before. We don't have a lot of moments of her like acknowledging what's happening for real. So she goes home and everybody's like, did you get a new diagnosis, and she's like, no, it's the same one, but it's right. The verdict is in. I am officially medically certifiably quote unquote crazy. And I'm like, girl, nobody said that. Nobody said that. But it feels that way to her. And she decides that she's going to go to bed. Paula is about to come with her, and she says alone. And this is when everybody begins to try and cope with the way that they all individually can. So we have Paula not knowing what to do because she wants to follow and mother her. And Rebecca doesn't want her there and actively locks the door behind her, and Paula hears it. And it's just, it's a very firm rejection. Valencia is trying to do this thing with this, social media. And Heather is hooking up with Hector, which I'm really like, I am 100% behind her doing this, but I wonder if that's going to work out or not. And so we have that, that morning of them waking up on the floor outside of her bedroom, and eventually Rebecca going into the bathroom with her headphones on and missing the thing, and then going into crisis there, which I pretty much talked about. So I'm going to bounce back, and we're going to talk about Nathaniel. I thought this was really actually well done. Nathaniel, it's sort of I feel like they're making him so much more of a thing so quickly that a part of me is a little bit uncomfortable with it. But he actually pulls off the sort of panic attack symptoms that he's having as an actor really well. I felt those couple of moments where he stops and blinks really hard. I don't know if you guys have ever had that, but sometimes when you have a panic or anxiety attack, things will sort of swim. You'll feel like it's hard to describe. And that shaking of the head and the squeezing close his eyes thing, it just felt like exactly what I've experienced. I just saw it, So he keeps trying to talk to Rebecca, writing her a note, a message, anything to sort of convey that he cares and is worried. And every time he starts to write something, he has this really intense reaction, and it's not clear what's going on with him. It almost feels like, at first I thought, is this supposed to be him continuing to have really strong feelings for her and simply not knowing how to deal with it? But it becomes clear pretty quickly that this is about him personally and something that went on with him. So we see him go to his family home, this amazing house with his father and mother, this incredibly waspy couple who are, the types that rather than have feelings, they would rather have cocktails. And he wants to talk about this incident that he has suddenly begun to remember from when he was 9 years old. And his parents absolutely do not want to talk about it. The main obstacle is his father, because he believes that he remembers his mother attempting to commit suicide. But when he tries to talk about it, his father just keeps on blocking him. And he begins to get very agitated at the fact that they both are clearly lying to him. And kind of has a bit of an outburst, which causes his mom to get up and leave and his dad to yell at him. He comes back the next day and it's just all right, Mom, look, I'm really sorry for freaking out yesterday. I just had a friend who, is going through this, and I'm kind of freaking out. But if you don't want to tell me, I understand, and I didn't mean to make you upset by bringing it all back up again. And he's about to leave, and she stops him. And I loved how this was handled in terms of the actual language used, because she never says, I tried to kill myself, and then I went to a outpatient facility or inpatient facility for treatment and eventually got a bunch of therapy and recovered. She says, I made a mistake and then I went somewhere. it's all extremely vague, and it just rings really true to me with what I have seen of this kind of community. I have never been part of this community, but I have lived very close to it in a few different phases of my life, and this feels right on target. This sort of vague nothing language is extremely symptomatic of people who are trying to keep a veneer on things. And you know, they have this just moment of closeness, and it's really nice. Like, obviously he has never had this with his parents before. And so to have this moment with her, it's just a bit of growth for him. And I like that they both agree that he absolutely should not tell his father about this at all. And she asks if he wants some roses from her garden. And we have Rebecca eventually catching him putting the roses down at her doorstep, and him telling her, I just wanted to, you know, make sure that you were okay. And I like that Rebecca doesn't do anything to encourage him to stay, and he doesn't attempt to, like, invite himself in. They are both giving one another space. Rebecca's taking space for herself, which she so rarely does. And I just was glad that this didn't lead to any more nonsense between the two of them, because I wasn't looking forward to that. So, and it's also sort of impressive because, you know, I just, like I said, I wasn't really sure how much Nathaniel would prove to be like a diehard in her life. And it's nice to see that he is still here checking up on her after everything that has happened, which means to me that he is genuinely interested. This sort of major incident could really make somebody who isn't super into you back off and be like, okay, that's a little bit too much drama for me. But he doesn't have that reaction, and I feel like that's a good sign. So that brings us to Josh. Josh himself is having a talk in the park with Hector. And I love this conversation because Hector, like, he says, I'm ready, give it to me straight. And Hector's like, what are you talking about? And he says, well, what is Rebecca saying about me? Which, it's really understandable why Josh would think this was how the conversation would go. The old Rebecca would have been talking about Josh. It would have been like what he's thinking. He doesn't understand how she has turned this corner. He doesn't get that yet. And Hector doesn't even really either. He knows that it's not about Josh, but he doesn't, like, know how to verbalize that, I don't think. So he just says, I've been there basically every day and I haven't heard your name once. And Josh says, I don't need you to shield me. Give it to me straight. I'm responsible for someone trying to take their own life. And Hector's like, I don't think that's what's happening here. From what I've picked up, that's not how suicide works. It's really just like a mental illness issue. And Josh says, but Rebecca's been obsessed with me since I was 16. I ruined her. And this is on me. I gotta do something to make things right. I love that he shows up at the hospital earlier and everybody is like, what are you doing? Get the fuck out of here. And the look on Heather and Valencia's faces. And at one point he says, will you at least tell her I was here? And they both are like, nope. No, we certainly will not. And I was like, oh, bless you guys. I love you so much. So this leads to the final moments of this episode where Daryl shows up in this, like, body makeup that's amazing, having driven and gotten stuck in traffic in a convertible. So he's practically purple from this horrible sunburn that he wound up getting. And he is standing in the living room just talking about how if he ever gets his hands on Josh, he will deck him. He'll kill him. I'll stab him. I forget what he even says. And he's in the middle of saying this when we see Josh roll up outside. And the way that the split screen is done, Josh is like standing outside the door, but nobody else knows he's there. And he's carrying a puppy with a ribbon around its neck, which I cannot emphasize enough how many layers of bad idea that is. The idea that he was going to show up like this, the idea that he would bring a pet, a dog. It's not even just a goldfish, a cat, a bunny. All of those would still be bad ideas, but there's slightly less maintenance. A dog. Dude. What? And he's standing there and he says, when I get my hands on that jerk, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. All of this is his fault. I could murder him right now. And Rebecca says, Daryl, calm down. This is not Josh's fault. I mean, it feels weird to even say Josh's name. I haven't thought about him in days. It's almost like Josh is irrelevant. And outside, Josh genuinely looks kind of bummed out. And I really love this as well, because it's so easy to get sort of on this ego thing, making it about you, and almost take pride in the fact that somebody was so obsessed with you that you managed to like drive them to the edge. And I think he, as much as he would never admit it, there was a part of him that was like, sort of felt like that was powerful in a way. So to realize that it really is not about him, that she hasn't even thought of him, that's a whole different, like, interpretation of the situation that he now has to cope with. This isn't her saying this to his face. This is her saying this to her friends, not knowing that he's standing there. This is as honest as she's going to get around him about what's been happening. So I loved that moment. And I mean, we've all known this whole time that it hasn't been about Josh. So for her to finally say that and really believe it is just, it's huge. It's a huge step forward for her. And I just love it. I really do. So yeah, so that's everything. That's this episode. Not as funny as some of them have been, but they just did a lot of good stuff with all the characters. So, you know, you can't make everything funny. It doesn't always work. You can do your best, but, you know, there are always going to be things that it's going to be trickier, and I'm fine with them focusing much more on character stuff and the real feelings that people are having instead of focusing too much on the comedy. I think that's the right call. So, all right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again, Erica, so much for commissioning this episode. Thank you, Megan, for being in the chat and helping me out with names and everything. And I will be seeing you all again pretty soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.